Hey everyone, my name is Ben and you're listening to A Daily Dose of English. This is a short, simple podcast that you can listen to every day to improve your English. You can find the transcripts for all episodes and more at benslanguagelab.com. I'm glad you could make it today. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the New York accent, the general New York accent, which is why I went back to the word more instead of a little more New Yorker, more, because we're going to talk about that today. And I think it's kind of fun. So the New York accent actually there's a bunch of different ones in that area. There's so many people that there's actually a lot of different accents that you can find from all sorts of different parts of New York. If you've never been to New York or haven't really learned about it that much, there are 5 boroughs, which are different sections of the city that feel really quite different. Each of them have very different feelings and economies and number of people, and they end up having really quite different accents. And New York is one of the most linguistically diverse places on earth, and so there are a ton of people that are maybe native English speakers, but with a ton of influence from every language in the world, basically. And there are lots of different, subcultures in New York that have been around for decades, maybe even 100 years, right? We talked about Italian food the other day, and Italian Americans, there's plenty of them, and a lot of them are from New York and that area. And there's quite a specific accent to even various different parts, not even just New York City. And so I'm only going to talk kind of generally about what you might hear of the New York accent, the New York metropolitan accent that is pretty recognizable, but there are many others in there. So if you go to New York and you hear other accents, that's probably why. It's quite similar to a lot of the kind of more New England accents in a lot of ways, but there's plenty of things that make it a little bit different. I really quickly want to go back to the boroughs thing, borough is not a super common word for a place, but we use it in New York for some reason. And the 5 boroughs are Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. Yeah, those are the 5. And those are the different parts of the actual city itself. There is New York State as well. There's upstate New York, and there's also Long Island. Long Island actually sounds pretty similar to this accent. And if you look at New York on a map, you can see there's sort of the 3 parts. There's the island that is Long Island. Then there's that part that everybody has seen before, that's the city. Usually we think of Manhattan. That's the most famous borough. And then everything above it, so upstate, is upstate New York. So anyways, with that, let's get into the accent, which is mostly heard in parts of Brooklyn, Queens. It's really heard everywhere, but I think primarily it's people from sort of the more north in Manhattan, I think Staten Island, and other parts of just New York in general. But let's get into the vowels, because as we've talked about before, the vowel sounds, the ow, ah, e, those are the things that really change in especially in English accents or English dialects. A lot of other things are the same, right? There's not a huge change in how they say their T's or their P's or whatever, but there's tons of changes in vowels. So I'm actually following a list on Wikipedia. There's a fantastic article about, there's a lot of really good articles about various English accents that have really good charts if you can read IPA. And I'm going to be going through that right now. So the first thing that we look at is the ah sound in my accent, ah. And so you can hear it just like that in New York, or act, pal. But then also you can hear a little bit of a different version, act, or bath and mad, or pass, kind of an ah sound. That's a good one, ah, pass. Ah ends up being very similar, right? Father, maybe it's a little fronted, father, but again, it's pretty much the same. And then we get to the sort of the more closed sounds, all, like in bother and lot. Like that's pretty much the same as my accent. But then there's a sound that I don't even have in my dialect, which is or something like that. And they might say it in bought or saw, dog, loss. And that's just a really good sound there. It sort of starts tight and close, and it almost like relaxes. Or, dog. Can I pet your dog? Can I pet your dog? Then we get into very much the same, right? Dress, met, not a huge change. Now there is with the schwa sound, the right? About, arena, same sounds. It can kind of change a little bit, just like a little bit of like a little bit higher or something with hit, but it's really similar. Skim. E as well. It can become a, which has like it starts a bit lower, then it goes E. So like BAME, flate, but that's not super common, and it's very subtle, so you're probably not going to notice it. Sound like in bus and flood, also the same. Like in book and put, also the same. And ooh is very similar, just like I do it. But you might hear it as ooh sometimes, and like an actual true nu. But that's not that common. You're going to mostly hear ooh, food, glue, or things like that. Well, that's just the same as my accent. I'd actually recommend that nobody ever say pure ooh in English. Like in food, it just sounds really strange. It's always this ooh sound. But yeah. Then we get into the diphthongs, which are a little bit different, but they're mostly the same, right? There might be a little bit of lowering in like ride, and bright, or things like that. Now and is very much the same. Lake and paid is going to be the same. Oi and choice and boy, moist. Same sounds pretty much as my accent. Same thing with O is like goat. O, they might have it a little bit lower, and or sorry, a little bit more closed rather. O, goat, and show, but I don't think that's really going to be noticed or anything like that. But the core is in the R's, because a lot of New York accents are non-rhotic, which means that they don't have the sound in most of their words. And so instead of saying barn or car, you're going to hear ban and ka, or ka. Ka. There we go. It goes up. Ka, ban, ka, and pak. Ah, right? So like in some like Australian accent and some British accents, right? There's not really a change. Like you hear ka, or park. There's like no change in that vowel. It's just a long ah. But in the New York accent, it does like go upwards. So ka, bon, on. So park, the ka, and the bon. You might hear. If you hear, like, we might talk about the Boston accent at some point, but that's where you might hear park, the ka, and the ban. That, again, doesn't have the same like sound, and it also doesn't really change. But this is a little bit lower and almost, I think of it as like starting low and then relaxing. Bon, ka, and pak. I wonder what the subtitles are going to be in this. That's going to be interesting to see. The next R sound we have is ear, which becomes really similar. Ear, fia, pia, and tia. Same thing with air, becomes bear, there, put it there. So the phrase that I like to use for this is, here there are no cars. Here there are no cars. Right? Here there are no cars becomes here there are no cars. Here there are no cars. Sorry. Got to work on that. And so what you might notice, that car suddenly sounds a bit like cuz, like because. Cause and cause, which does happen, right? Because we can have what are called homonyms. No, that's wrong. Homophones, that's the word. Homo is like the root for same, and phone is the root for sound. So homophones are the words that sound the same but are written differently or mean different things or whatever. We get the same R sound in like burn, doctor, horse, score, tour. We also get a your in like cure, Europe, pure. And so we get this I almost think of like New York accent sounding a bit like harsher, like when you start the sounds, like they feel like they jump out at you almost, which I think is really cool. I really like the New York accent. I'm not very good at it, but I think it's cool. There is this caught distinction, which is something you might have heard of before, but that's that thing that I mentioned earlier of the difference between aw in dog and ah in bother, dog, or all, bought, things like that. Because I would say them the same. Bother, dog, all the same vowel. There's also a thing in what's called a short A split system, which there are slightly different sounds, or sounds, depending on like what the word is. And it's a thing that you just sort of learn. And so if I look at this chart, we see like words like fan, and lamb are like that. But then animal, planet, and Spanish have this sound. Same with frank. Bag can have bag. Dragon can have and then we get like words like grab instead of grab has this sort of like fan, grab. Same with ask or bath or happy, or no, happy, sorry, is happy. And so like there's this split between those words, right? Some of them are pronounced like and some of them are pronounced like In my dialect, I say only the ones that are before m and n as always. Spanish, animal, fan, lamb, all that, and everything else is But my mom, for example, she says Spanish, and I don't know why. She's from the same part of the country as I am. I've met people that say Spanish and animal. Like there are these splits that happen, and it's not consistent. It's really cool, but it's a great example of why languages just cannot be memorized like that, because these splits are completely arbitrary. Anyways, I see that I've run over time. We're 12 and a half minutes into this. So I thank you very much for listening to this episode of A Daily Dose of English. And I hope that you enjoyed and maybe learned a little something. Let me know down in the comments what accent you want to hear about next. But that's all from me. I'll see you again. Bye. Have a good one.